Hey, what's up everyone? It's Shamrock here with a boss guide for you. This is for the Archmage Soul boss in the Everbloom dungeon. Specifically, this guide is for a 27 Tyrannical with Spiteful and Incorporeal as the affixes, but this guide is sufficient for pretty much any level of play. So before actually going into the boss itself, let's just take a look at the talents that I chose for this week. So on the left side, some things of note, because it is an incorporeal week, I do have Hex talented, and to get down into Hex, I just use Static Charge, and I take that point away from Windrush / Earth Grab, because neither of those are really necessary for this dungeon specifically, but really you don't really need them for any dungeon. They're kind of just nice to haves. Next, I have 1 point into Elemental Warding. This point actually could go anywhere. You could take this, you could put it into Surging Shields, which I wouldn't really recommend. You could put it into Earth Elemental, which is actually a great cooldown to have for this dungeon. But me specifically, I like having it into Elemental Warding, especially for the Archmage Soul boss, because it is going to just give you a little bit of extra survivability. It's also great for Yalnu, the last boss, and the Ancient Protectors. Pretty much all of the damage in this dungeon is nature damage, which counts as magic damage. So this is going to help you. I would actually love to have 2 points in here, but unfortunately I do have to siphon that 1 point into Poison Cleansing Totem. So if you're in a group where you don't need it, and actually when I'm looking back, I probably didn't need this point into Poison Cleansing Totem because we had a Druid as well as a Paladin in the group, so they could have handled the poisons, but I usually am just in the habit of taking this for Everbloom just to be safe. But if you don't, I would make it so you have 2 points into Elemental Warding, or you could go into Earth Elemental as well, once again for that extra defensive. For Stone Skin, I would say stay away from it for this dungeon. Maybe it's useful in Fortified because it'll just help with some of the Lasher melee damage that the tanks will be taking, but like I said before, pretty much all of the damage in this dungeon is nature damage, so Stone Skin is not going to help you out that much. Looking on the right side, this is probably my standard build for most Tyrannical dungeons, if not all. Every so often I'll take my point out of control and I'll put it into Stormkeeper, or if I'm really not worried about the healing, I'll also take the point out of Spirit Walker's Tidal Totem and Mana Tide Totem and put it into Master of the Elements and Lava Surge. So if you're running maybe some lower keys and you're more interested in damage, this is probably what you would run. Just like this, but if you're running the keys at the higher level and you're more concerned with healing than doing damage and you're confident your group does not need that extra little bit of damage to time the key, this is what I would run. Current Control in this dungeon is mostly useful for the last boss. It's actually useful for me personally for Archmage Soul just because it is the very first cooldown I pop for that first round of Firebolts, which you'll see as we go into the boss, which we can do right now. Yeah, so that's the talents. If you have any questions, just let me know in the comments. Okay, so in my opinion, this boss is probably one of the hardest of the season, if not the hardest of the season, just because of how chaotic it is. That being said, there are some tricks that you can do to just make it a little bit more survivable. So I do have a little bit of a science to this boss. So when the boss starts, you always get this first Cinderbolt Storm right away. So I use Healing Tide Totem basically right off the bat as soon as the fight starts. And that will basically make sure that nobody dies during that Cinderbolt Storm. Healing Tide for this fight is not amazing, but it's enough to keep people alive. And the nice thing about this fight is all you need to do is keep people alive during the Cinderbolt Storm, and then you have a good 10 seconds to actually top people up between abilities. So keeping people alive is the name of the game. Alright, so for this second Firestorm, I use Ancestral Guidance. And once again, just like standard, I'm trying to use abilities that I know will come up towards the end of the fight. So my bigger cooldowns with longer cooldowns like Ascendance and Slink, and if I weren't running Current Control, it would be Healing Tide as well. I save for towards the middle of the fight just because you're not really going to get 2 uses. This fight is only about 3.5 minutes long. Alright, and then also keep in mind you're going to get these easy combinations of the Frost and the Arcane ability, which you're watching right now. This is what we consider the easy one because there's no actual damage going out, so just make sure you keep your eyes open in case anybody needs a Dispel if they run into the ice, but otherwise those are your sections to sort of get some DPS in and just make sure you're ready for the next one. You'll see by accident I actually popped Mana Tide Totem there, which I do have Spirit Walker's Tidal Totem, so that is definitely an ability you want to save for a Firestorm. That was just me, I sort of fat fingered it. Alright, so for this fire one, I used Astral Shift and Spirit Walker's Grace. So for the fire, you kind of want to make sure that you're saving something for every ability. It doesn't have to be a major cooldown. It can be a minor cooldown. It can be a defensive. Spirit Walker's Grace, I would consider a cooldown in this instant. If you have a Resto that's a defensive like Stoneform, you can use that. Just use something, anything to help you out, at least for like every single Firestorm. For this next one, I'm popping Ascendance. And you'll also notice before every Firestorm, I'm pretty much prepping like a good 3-4 seconds before it actually comes out. So I'll pop my cooldowns before, I will put my Cloudburst Totem before, I will put out Chain Heals just to put some healing into the Cloudburst Totem, as well as get Ancestral Vigor, which is the 10% health increase on the entire group before the ability starts. And then I just continue that healing into the Firestorm. And what that's going to do is, first of all, it's going to make it so you're not trying to play catch up, which honestly, that's the biggest mistake you can make on this boss, is like waiting until a Firestorm starts happening and then popping your abilities, because it's very easy to fall behind and somebody will likely die. This fight is very deadly anyways, even if you are doing it correctly, so hopefully you have a B-res or two saved up for this moment. But like I said, if you follow what I'm doing here and just pre-prep for everything and make sure you have an ability for, somewhat of a cooldown or defensive for everything, you should be good. All right, so for this next one, I am popping. I had my Cloudburst Totem down. So this is actually one where I had to do sort of naked. I didn't have anything. I did have a Nature Swiftness there, which is great, and even then I would count. But going into that, I didn't have any super special ability like, Ancestral Guidance or whatever. I could have slinked there as well, but I did not. So actually maybe I slink here. But anyways, so what I did there to keep everybody from dying, even though I had nothing, is I set up my Primordial Wave, my Riptides on everybody, once again, before the ability actually starts, and then I just sort of go ham with the healing, and I pop my Cloudburst sort of halfway through the Cinderbolt Storm. That's a really important note for this fight as well, is you don't need to pop your Cloudburst afterwards. Half the time, or more than half, you should be popping it during the storm, just to give people, it doesn't even need to be a big Cloudburst, it can be a small one, but it just needs to give them a little boost of health so that they're not actually being killed by the Cinderbolt Storm. And then for that last one, I did use Ancestral Guidance again. Some other things to note for the gravity ball, just make sure that you're always watching where it is. So when you get the ice and the gravity, you sort of just want to get out of the ice, but towards the gravity so that you're not being pulled through the ice. Same thing for the fire. You want to get out of the fire and sort of towards the gravity, just so that you don't get pulled through fire. Which you'll see, I've actually been pulled through fire a couple of times, but as long as you have everybody topped up, getting one tick of the fire is not going to kill you. All right, so for this one, I used Astral Shift, and once again, that's it. I had my Cloudburst Totem beforehand, and then, as you can see, I hope you've been watching too, the ability tracker on the top left, you can see I'm always popping Cloudburst a good few seconds before the Cinderbolt Storm goes out, and I'm usually recalling it during the Cinderbolt Storm so that people are getting that boost of healing that I was talking about. All right, for this next one, I'm using Slink, and I can tell because we're all nice and close in there. If you're on comms, you should maybe call out if you're using something like Slink, just to give people a heads up. And then also a note, like hopefully you're playing with a group that is also popping stuff. So if you have Pallies, they should be sacking whoever's weakest. If you have an Evoker, they should be using Zephyr when they can. If you have a Demon Hunter, they should be using Darkness. Like this is basically a group effort that people should be working towards in order of defensives, just to help out. You'll notice this tank, really good tank, but just the health is dipping a lot, so I'm having to sort of divert some attention towards the tank here and there. That is not always the case. Sometimes you'll get a tank that can completely handle themselves and they don't really need any assistance, and that's nice because you can sort of fully just focus on the group. Also, in my experience, you don't really, like, the tank will need Dispels when they get the Frostbolt. You don't really have to bother with that, like, unless they're asking you to specifically. I wouldn't waste the globals on it. It's more important to get DPS in and to get ready for the next Cinderbolt Storm. But yeah, that's it. So like I said, I have this fight. I wouldn't say down to a science because it is slightly different every single time that you do it, depending on who's baiting, depending on who gets hit with Cinderbolt Storms. As you'll know, like some players get hit more times than others during each storm. It's kind of random. So all of that stuff is going to make the fight a little bit different every time. But in terms of rotating your cooldown usage, like I said, if you're running current control, always start with the Healing Tide, always go into Ancestral Guidance afterwards. Then you would go into Mana Tide Totem, because those are all abilities that you know are going to be up towards the end of the fight, even though it's a short 3.5 minute fight. Your abilities like Ascendance and Slink are going to be used towards the middle of the fight. just because you're probably only going to get one use of them anyways. And then also just remember that everything small in this fight counts. So Spirit Walker's Grace, Nature Swiftness, Astral Shift, any racials that you have to help you out, all of those can be considered like, you know, sort of a mini cooldown to pop during the Cinderbolt Storm. For instance, Astral Shift and Spirit Walker's Grace pair amazingly in this one, because if you pop them, you basically don't have to worry about yourself, and then you can, you know, heal the group while you're running out of the fire and all that stuff. So once again, this fight is really practice. It took me a very long time to get completely used to it, to a point where I feel comfortable, and to a point where people, you know, weren't dying. Like, I usually get at least 1 or 2 people dying during this fight until I really got the hang of it recently. So yeah, that's it. The only other note I would say that I didn't really mention is when the Cinderbolt Storm happens, unfortunately you can't just sit there and plant. So just make sure you're running out of the way and keeping yourself safe first, because if you die, then it's very easy to like sort of cascade and everybody else starts dying too. Whereas if somebody else dies and you keep everybody else alive, hopefully you can just be-res that DPS or, you know, whatever. So I would say safety for yourself first. But yeah, that's it. As you can see, I'm actually going to Yalnu. I'm going to make a guide on this right now as well, so that'll be up as well soon. But yeah, hope you enjoyed this guide. Hope it helped you out. And really, honestly, as a shaman, even though we are not the best at moving and healing, we actually have a pretty good kit for healing the Archmage boss. So just keep that in mind. Don't let anybody saying that, you know, Resto Shaman is not good at it phase you, because we definitely are. All right, with that, I will see you next time. And oh yeah, happy holidays, by the way.